take later that execution. Coming Monday, show the CA8. Okay.
Okay.
What time class left?
Class is, sir, left, sir. Ma'am has closed the meeting.
No, what time she left?
Ma'am left at 12:33, 34. Yeah.
33, 34.
No.
No, sir, 39.
Yes, sir. Around 12:40 she ended the class.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good afternoon. So last class we discussed about some of the information which regarding to the servlet, right? That is what servlet request, servlet response, servlet and the request header, and what are the different methods which is available. I'm audible to you?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Different methods which is available in the all the three topics. That is what the servlet request, servlet response, and the request header part. So what are the various methods and what are the HTTP methods we have in the HTML? So similarly here also we have the same methods, but the convention is quite different compared to the HTML. That is what the HTTP request. So here we have get, do, get, head, do, head, post, put, delete. Right? So these are the 5 methods usually we will use in the HTTP. But among that we have 2 more methods. So these are the optional methods which we have. So majorly in our HTTP request, either is a request or a response, whatever the operation. So majorly we'll go with these 5 methods in the normal HTTP request. Similarly, in the servers, in the servlets also, we have the do, get, do, post, do, head, do, put, do, delete. These are the 5 methods which we frequently use, as well as whatever the execution is taking place in that, the get as well as the post always we will use. Apart from that, the deletion, obviously for delete the entire servlet operation, and put and head also we will use occasionally. So the majorly these are the 5 methods which we'll use in the servlet concept. So now we'll move to the next topic of this servlet. So that is what the deploying a servlet. I hope you guys already executed this program in the CN number 7 and CN number 6 also. So the program what you executed, that is what the deployment of the servlet. So how you have to run the program. So what are the components you have to take care, and what are the files you have to take care, how you have to connect between the files. That is what HTML file is there, Java file is there, and that web.xml file is there, web.config file is there, web.inf file is there. So some of the files which internally connected, but whatever the Java file you are creating, right? So that you have to connect to the servlet file which you are creating. That is what the web.configuration file or web.xml file. So the connection is very important here. So if the connection is not proper and if it's successfully enabled, then whatever the executions you guys are doing, so you will get the respective HTTP response errors. It's not the code errors, is the HTTP response error. That is what you guys are getting. 404 page not found, panded, bad gateway, 502 forbidden, sorry, 403 forbidden, and 503 internal server error. So like this various response code will get, means your client request is successfully delivering to the server, but when the server accept and responding back to the client system, we are facing some of the issues. So if you correct that path or the file name or whatever the connectivity between the files, now successfully it will get executed. So this is what the deployment of the entire servlet application. So here now we will see step by step how we have to do it. But you guys are already executed, you know the concept how we have to configure the servlet file. Just I'll go through quickly about this deployment of the server. So the concept what we call deploying a servlet. It's not a running a servlet application. It's not executing the application. It's a deploying. Deploy. Why deploy? So in the next slides you will see why I'm using the term called deploy whenever I'm using the servlet. So why okay, just I'll give the brief information about the deploy. So if it's a simple only a Java program, what you will do, you will execute. So since Java file alone is there, so you will execute. But when there are multiple files, all the multi-file files are connected each other. So the entire code, the entire files you have to run at a time, right? So whenever you are running the program, so each and every page has to be coordinate each other. So because of this scenario, what we call the deployment. So obviously the deploy, execute in the sense, so everything is there directly execute. Deployment in the sense, the different parts of the program are connecting each other and I'm running at a time. So this concept overall, what we call the deployment. So that is what the concept of the deployment. So how we have to deploy the servlet, so that we will see. So for sure, it's important to understand that if you are already deploying in any servlet application, it will handle some client requests. So that is what client request in the sense, as soon as when you open any of the web applications, right? So after deploying your entire project, the page will get open. The page in the sense, the web page will get open. So once you are operating that web page, either clicking the buttons, clicking the radio buttons or checkboxes, or clicking the URL links. So these kinds of request when it's taking place from the user side, right? So that will go to the server, that will go to the servlet, or that will go to the server. So in the server, it will check what are the operation has to be performed based on the user request. So that is what, whenever you talk about the servlets, we need to develop an index.html page. So this is the default page which is available when you are creating the servlets. So this is the index.html. So in your web applications, I'm not talking about the Java or any servlets. In general, whatever the web applications, either it's a JavaScript or a PHP or any kinds of web applications when you're developing, the basic and default page always is configured in the name of index.html. So suppose if you don't want the name index.html, you can change it to whatever the name you want, like welcome.jsp or welcome.html, or you can take home.html, home.jsp is your convenient. But always the default name which will be in the file is a index.html. So we have to configure the information in the index.html. So it can be any other name also, so which will request the particular servlet to handle the request made by the client. So this is very important. So whatever the naming convention you are giving for the particular page, right? So that name should be reflected in your code, in your Java code. So if the name is mismatched, you will get 404, page not found. Even there is a single extra character space, even single, there is a change in the cases also. Cases in the sense the uppercase, lowercase also, it won't match. It's a case sensitive. You have to match it thoroughly. The program, what you executed, CS7 servlet or CS6 servlet, whatever the file name you are giving for the particular program, right? So that should be reflected in your web.config file. So there also have to give the same class name. The file name in the sense the class name which you are mentioning in your Java file, the same class name you have to give it here also when you are mapping with the servlet. So that will see later. So here this index file or welcome.html or home.html, whatever the naming convention, so that should be very important to handle the servlets. Okay, now I'll mute all you guys. So if you have any queries, just raise the hands using the emojis, right? Okay. Otherwise, I'm getting some disturbance. The meeting is locked. Okay. So in this case, index.html page. So you can change whatever the file name you want, or let it be no problem, index.html. So sometimes we have to use this some of the default information as it is. Why? Because to avoid unnecessary errors in my execution, or to avoid unnecessary exceptions in my programs. So let it be whatever the file name is there. So the same file name I have to use in the entire execution. Why unnecessary errors as well as the exception? So far you guys are executed only a simple servlet program. Hardly you have a just what you guys are doing. You are creating the Java file. That's it. Nothing else. Everything is just you are connecting. But when you are taking the Hibernate, so compared to the servlet, there are more number of files which is available. So in multiple paths, or in the multiple ways, in the multiple places, we have to configure the files. So there it will lead to the confusion. Suppose already index is there, because whenever you are using the servlet, one index will get created. Whenever you are using the Hibernate also, one more index file will get created, which is related to the Hibernate. So that time it will get confused which index I have to use. So that's why. So the renaming is very important, or whatever the name you are suggesting for your home page, or whatever the index page, that is become the major part here. If that is mismatch, definitely it won't get executed. So you will get the run from the server. You will get the error from the server side, not from the client side. So that is what very important. So these are the three steps which we have to deploy the entire servlet application. So first is creating the index.html page, creating the lifecycle servlet, and creating the deployment descriptor. So here, creating the index HTML page, sometimes what we'll do by mistake, if we delete the pages, we can add that in HTML page. By default time, it will take index.html only. So if the HTML page does not exist in my application, just you add the HTML page, like how we are adding the multiple files in your Java. Go to directory, right click, new, in the new, directly go to the Java file, HTML file, web configure, XML file, and any kinds of the application or a file which you want, you can just add it to the particular project, so it will get added. So like this, these are the first step. These are the three stages which we have: index.html, lifecycle servlet, and deployment descriptor. So here I'm taking the word lifecycle. So this is optional. You can give whatever the naming you want. So why I'm giving here? So because in the next slide example, I'm taking this as a one of my class name. So here now what I'm doing, I'm creating the index.html page. Initially, I'm creating the index.html page. So for that, why I'm required this index.html page to interact with the respective server or to get the graphical information in the browser, right? So we have to create some HTML pages. So for that, I'm going with this respective HTML code, simple HTML code. That is what open HTML, form tag I'm using, form action, attribute I'm using. In the action, I'm using the add a value called lifecycle servlet. So this lifecycle servlet. So as soon as when I click on the particular button or as soon as when I invoke some operation in the HTML page, it will redirect to the particular class or a particular file which I added. So it's nothing but the class name which I'm considering, lifecycle servlet. So then input attribute I'm taking, input the tag I'm taking, type is the attribute, submit. So as soon as when I use the value called submit, immediately the button will get created. You just remember the CA number 6, what you guys are executed. Click here to get the time and date. The button how you created, like this only. When you put the when you add an attribute called type equals submit, immediately button is created. For that button, you are giving the name for click here to know the time and date, or just click here to know time or date. So value what I'm giving here, invoke lifecycle servlet. The naming I'm giving here. The button what I created is in the submit button format, and the value in the sense the label for the button I'm giving as a invoke lifecycle servlet. Then I'm ending the form HTML. So this is a simple form which I created. So I created the HTML page with the form action. After clicking this button, where it has to go? It has to go to this respective file, lifecycle servlet. Where is this particular file? I have in the next slide. So next we will see. This is a simple index file, index.html, which we have to create. So next, this is the code what I have. So how to create that lifecycle servlet, at the actual Java code, the operation which we want to perform. So as I said, so when we see the life cycle of the servlet, there are three methods which is very essential in the entire servlet operation. That is what initial method, init method, service method, and desktop method. So we have to use all three methods here. So first I'm importing the servlet packages, then I'm input output, then public class lifecycle servlet. This is my class name, which I use in the action attribute of the HTML form. In the previous slide, you just remember form action equals lifecycle servlet, the value, the parameter what I use, right? So that is my class name in Java. So implements servlet class, then servlet config class I'm using, attribute or the object which I'm using, it is defining is a config equals null. So initially I'm configuring the servlet class with the null. So there is no configuration exists. Sometimes why I'm initializing here, suppose if any previous configuration exists, no. So again, if I run the program multiple times with the different classes or different applications, it will take previous only. To avoid that one, what I'm doing, so I'm assigning the value null to the configuration file. It's just nothing but when you are doing a sum of a plus b, right? What you will do, sum equals 0. Int sum equals 0, int a comma b. So sum equals a plus b. Why you are assigning 0 to the sum? Because to do not accept any garbage value, any other value, it initializes to 0. So whatever the a plus b I'm performing, so that value will save in the sum, right? So similarly here also, whatever the value which exists in the previous or does not exist, no problem. But I'm assigning null value to the configuration, to the configuration object, that is what available in the servlet configuration class. So next I'm using the public void init. So initializing the, initially I'm invoking the initialize method, init method. So for the parameter which I'm passing is servlet config. Again, the class I'm using the different variable called sc. So you can use whatever the variable name or whatever the object name you want. So config equals sc. So config equals sc. So config equals sc in the sense. So this is the class parameter. This is the function parameter. So both I'm assigning. So here, so now it holds the value of this sc, value of servlet configuration variable. Next, system.println, simple SOP in init. So in init in the sense, right now I'm in the init method. So next service method I'm calling here public static service. The parameter I'm passing, which is servlet request pick and servlet response rest, throw servlet exception and IO exception, the basic default program what we seen in the previous class. So rest in the sense the response, rest dot set content type text slash HTML. So whatever the data I'm getting as a response, right? So that it in the format of the HTML page. So next print writer PW variable I created equals rest dot get writer. So here for the response also I'm using the method called get writer which exists in the print writer class. So whatever the data I'm getting from the different or another file or different from the server, right? So that content you have to receive and you have to add it. Where you have to add it? You have to add to the variable called PW. Variable called PW. So pw.println. So whatever the data it is received, right? So whatever the data it is received in PW, so that I'm displaying in the format of this like this H2 hello from lifecycle servlet, hello from lifecycle servlet. So there is a two-way communication. Client is requesting to the server, server is responding back to the client. So here the transaction is going on, the communication is happening. So to catch hold that communication to print to the end user, so these respective stream writer, print writer, or the IO stream classes are required. Then I'm putting the SOP statement in service, means I'm in the service method. Next, I'm calling the destroy method, SOP statement in destroy. Whatever the things are embedded or whatever the things are enabled during the execution, everything will destroy. Next, I have one more function called public string get servlet info. I want to know what is the servlet information. So for that, I'm using the method called get servlet info. So return lifecycle servlet. So what is the data I'm receiving here, right? So that data I will receive in the particular get servlet information. So get servlet information in the sense after processing, after response from the server side, what are the information I'm getting. So everything it will keep track and it will place in the, you return back to the respective response of the client side. So that is what I'm returning life cycle servlet. What are the data it exists now? So that data it will return it here. Next, we have a public servlet configuration, the servlet config get servlet configuration method. So what is the configuration I'm taking? Here I'm taking the configuration, right? Here I'm taking the configuration. That is what servlet config equals null. So next time what I'm doing in the init method, I'm initializing config equals sc. So this sc is passing the value to the config. So that config file holds the value of sc. So this sc, it will return what are the values it holds. What are the values it holds. So like this, the different parts of the method we have to use in a servlet one by one. And this once I done with this code, once I done with this, this is a Java code. This is the Java code. Next, what I'm doing, I'm going to the next file called creating a deployment descriptor. That is what web.xml. This is a very important file in the servlets. So whatever the Java file you created, right? So those respective class names as well as the functionalities you have to add in the descriptor class. So that is what the XML file. So here the file extension itself .xml. So we have to consider web.xml. It's a default file which will get created when you created a new project, when you created the servlet project. So now we will see how to deploy this respective descriptor also. That is what web.xml file. So the code is already visible, already available in the page. Just you have to do some modification. You have to change the respective classes as well as the URL of the particular files. So here XML version 1.0 encoding in UTF universal file transformation. That is what 8. So we are using the tag called web app. I'm using the tag called web app. So in the XML file, once you open any of the tag, you have to close it. You have to close it. So this entire information I put in the respective tag called web-app. That respective tag I close at the end here. So next, I'm opening the servlet tag. Inside the servlet, I have a sub tag called servlet name and servlet class. So what is my servlet name? My servlet name is lifecycle servlet. end with the tag. What is my servlet class? Lifecycle servlet. So here servlet class which I'm using is my class name. Is my class name. So the same class name which I used in the index.html here. There is a connectivity. There is a connectivity. So this is very important here. This is very important in the servlet. The same class I'm taking here as a lifecycle class. I'm closing the servlet, and the closing of the opening of the and closing of the servlet tags are very, very important. What are the contents you are adding inside that? It's very, very important. If any mismatches, if any unnecessary data you put, no, entire application won't work. Means request will go from the client side, but response you don't get it. Some response codes you will get it. So next, I'm added the servlet code. Servlet code in the sense that added the class file here. Next, what I'm doing, I'm doing the mapping. I'm doing the mapping. That is what servlet hyphen mapping. Servlet name equals lifecycle servlet. The same servlet name I'm using here. What I used. So then URL pattern equals slash lifecycle servlet, ending with the URL pattern. So URL pattern, whatever the file name you guys are giving, so that respective file name you have to give. Respective file name you have to give. So here what I'm doing, so I'm using the file name called slash lifecycle servlet. So in your program, if you're using like index.html, so that path you have to give index.html only, or directly you have to give the index. Other than that, the pattern which you are giving. So why I'm giving here the life cycle servlet, you just see here, that is what action lifecycle servlet. So this has to be matched in the air. This has to be matched in the web.xml file. The servlet mapping has to take place with the HTML file. That is what lifecycle servlet, the action. So once this action get invoked, next immediately it come to the Java file and it will execute the entire operation and it will get back to the console of the user screen. Next, I'm closing the servlet mapping, then session configuration timeout. So up to 30 seconds, it will wait for the connectivity. If the within the 30 seconds or up to 30 seconds, the connection is not established, you will get connection is not established. This will be the default. If you want, you can change that value. So instead of 300, instead of 30, you can put to the 300 also. Up to 300 seconds, it keeps on rolling, it keep on loading the entire connectivity. So once it reaches the 300 minutes, so 300 seconds, then it will get expired. So like that you can use. So and note down. So these are the things are optional, but keep as it is. Don't touch anything here. Don't touch anything. You have to change only these respective values. One is URL pattern and the servlet classes. So these two servlet names by default it will take during the creation of the project. Whatever the name you given for the servlet, right, during the project creation, that name only it will take. No need to change anything. But we have to concentrate only on so the servlet class which you are using as well as the pattern which you are using. So this only you have to take care. And whenever you are specifying the URL pattern, this forward slash is very, very important. Forward slash is nothing but inside the same folder, it will identify the file. It will identify the file called lifecycle servlet. If you miss the slash, no, you don't enable anything, you don't find anything. It's nothing but the simply a name. It's simply a name. So that's why. So don't remove the forward slash here in the URL pattern. So that indicates the file existing in the same directory. Suppose the file exists in the different directories, the path you have to mention where exactly you have a particular path you have to mention. So this is how we have to use the deployment descriptor. That is what we call web.xml. In the examination, they might ask, explain the process of deployment descriptor or just describe web.xml. Both are same. When you are getting the terminology like deployment descriptor or web.xml, both functionalities are same, both are same. Don't confuse. Okay, next. So this is the output, how I'll get it once I invoke once I deploy my entire servlet application. Simply create the above three files under the web application project. The name, whatever the name you want, you can give. Here I'm taken as a web application project, and then simply run above application. So first, what will happen here? First of all, index.html file will get executed. Means the home page, the very first HTML page what we created using the form action equals lifecycle servlet, then input type equals button, and value equals invoke lifecycle servlet. Now, so that page is visible here. That page is visible. It's just like click here to know the time and date. That is what CA number 6, or in CA number 7. enter your username, enter the password, then you pressing the button, login button or get in or whatever the naming convention you given, right? So this is the page, this is the default page which I'm getting. And if you see the address bar also, localhost 8084 are dynamically checking. So lifecycle underscore servlet, under the folder, I have a file called index.html. Indexer. So now I'm using the HTML file called index.html, that also visible. So after clicking this button, next it will redirect, it will proceed for the next form. It will proceed for the next page. So that is what here. So hello from lifecycle servlet. Hello from lifecycle servlet. So in the above link, invoke lifecycle button is clicked, then the code under the service method to the lifecycle servlet is executed. So here, what will happen? So web.xml file we are getting for the configuration between the files, connection between the files. That is what Java file as well as the HTML index file. So now after clicking the index file, that is what after clicking the button, next it is going to the Java. In the Java file, that is what the lifecycle servlet.java what we saved. So then it will go to there. It will start with the init method. It will start with the init method. Here it will start from this particular class. It starts from the init method, then go to the services, then it will go to the destroy classes. So once the connection is successfully established, then when the server is response back to the client, the data is okay. That is what 100 or 200. The status code is 100 or 200. Okay, in the sense the connection is live as well as the data which the client is received also successful. So if that is received, then whatever the data he added to that particular data, I'll get it. That is what hello from lifecycle servlet. Hello from lifecycle servlet. So after clicking the button in the previous page, right? So after clicking the button previous page, so this is, you just check the URL here. So localhost 8084 lifecycle servlet question mark means the Java file is processed. Java file is processed. If you see here, I have index.html. When I click this button, immediately it will redirect. It will redirect to the this particular Java file, lifecycle servlet file. So whatever the data which exists, so that I'm getting hello lifecycle servlet exists. Where exactly I have this statement? So in the Java file here I have, that is what hello from lifecycle servlet in the print stream from the server, whatever the response I'm getting now, so that it will add to the respective variable called PW. So that PW I'm printing, that is what hello from lifecycle servlet. So it will print it in the browser. It will print it in the browser, client system browser. So this is how we have to deploy the servlet files. This is how we have to deploy the servlet files. Clear? It's clear how to deploy the application?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So next, continuation of this web application deployment descriptor. That is nothing but the web.xml file. So what exactly this file contains? Why the servlet tag as well as the servlet mapping tags are important? Why servlet and servlet mapping tags are important? This is what. So why? This is what the deployment descriptor web.xml file, web.xml. So why these servlet tags and servlet mapping tags are important in the deployment descriptor? So that we will see here. So that is what the web application deployment descriptor. So this deployment descriptor is a simple XML document used to map the URL to the servlet. So whatever the servlet files you are creating, right, to map the servlet file to the HTML file, you will go with the XML file. That is what we'll go with the web.configuration web.xml file. So it tells the container how to run the servlet and JSP. As of now, I'm not using the Java server pages, just I'm using the servlet only. The program what you executed in the CS6, CS7 or CS4, the JSP program, there we will use the web.configure. So by default, it will get enabled. So that is under the folder called the last folder when you create the application, right? When you create a project, when you enable the tree, when you enlarge the tree, the last folder what you have, so web.inf folder. In that we have a web.config, web.xml or web.config file. There the file is default available. So but in the servlet it will get enlarged. It will get enlarged because we have to configure the respective parts of the servlet file. So in a web application, deployment descriptor file is saved with the name of web.xml. In the name of web.xml only it will say. Don't change this file name at all. Don't change this file name at all, because If you're changing this file name internally, wherever the connectivity is happened, right? So everything you have to change it manually. You have to change it. So because of that, don't change the web.xml file. Leave as it is the default name, whatever it is given. So there are two XML elements that are used to map the URL in the servlet. One is servlet tags and another is servlet mapping tags. So servlet tag, it internally it maps the internal name to the servlet class name. So as I said already, so whatever the class name we are taking, right? So the particular class name, it will map with the servlet, whether the class exists or not. If the class does not exist, the application won't run in the from the client side itself. It won't execute at all. You will get the launching error. That is nothing but as soon as the web page get loaded, immediately I will get some backend code. The some of the files are missing, the class name is missing, like that. So here this servlet tag, it will identify the what is the class name in the Java file, and the same class name is reflect in the same web.xml file or not. Next we have the servlet mapping. It maps the internal name to the public name. Internal name to the public name in the sense the file name which I am taking, the index.html file, the mapping of the URL from the index.html to the web.xml file. So whether that public file name it will take, by default always it will search for the index.html. Suppose the index.html does not exist in your servlet application, in the servlet project, what it will do, it will next check with the HTML says what are the default what are the HTML files available. That is what welcome HTML, next home HTML. So in this various HTML also, what are the names you are binding in the URL? So what are the tags you are binding? What are the values you are binding in the URL, right? So here in the URL pattern, what are the names you are binding? So that name it will search. Either it say welcome.html, like home.html, or index.html. So like this it will search. By default, first it will give a preference to the index.html. Otherwise, if the index.html does not present, then it will go to the naming of name of the particular file, which extension of the HTML that it will map the particular HTML file. That is why it maps the internal name to the public name. Internal name in the sense the class name which we received in the servlet, and the public name in the sense the same class name should be exist in the action part. In the action part, there it will match it. Now let us know about these internal public and class names to the servlet. So these are the three names which we have to use in the respective servlet and servlet mapping. So in that first one is the class name. First one is the class name. So servlet is given a class name by the developer who is created. That is what I taken life cycle servlet. So you can give whatever the class name you want, so that it will match exactly in my classes, in my respective web.configuration, web.xml file, as well as the that HTML file in the action part, in the action equals so and so information, right? So that also it will match. The full path of servlet is combination of the servlet class name and its location of the server, where exactly it is. So sometimes what we will do, if everything is in the same folder, directly I'll give it only the class name. That is what sign up servlet.class. By default it will take. So no need to give the class name here, no need to give the extension as a class. So just what we have to give, sign up.servlet. That is what I done in the previous life cycle servlet. So if that is in the different folder of the same project section, with the same project section of the different folder, then we have to give the path also. So classes /record /sign up servlet.classes. So like this, we have to give the path. Otherwise, by taking the class name, we can add to the name. So next we have the internal name and a public name. So servlet can also be a deployment name. It is a secret name that can be same or different from the class name. The internal name in the sense what are the class name I'm taking, that should be matched with the XML as well as the HTML. So internally it will check whether both the names are correct. Once both the names are correct, then it will go for the next further options. Otherwise, it will stop it there. It will get back to the user with a particular error message in the web browser, not in the execution time, in the web browser, it will get back. Sometimes you can observe whenever you are doing the online transactions or any of the web pages, when you're downloading some of the materials, right? So it will give application status error or application error with the slash. That is example that exists in the C#.net. In the ASP.net page, the page is built. There you will get application error. Or sometimes in the ATM machine also, when you want to withdraw or deposit a money, right, in the e-lobby, when you visit that ATM, sometimes some of the codes are visible. So that is what the mismatching of the classes or mismatching of the data which exists in the application or in the entire project. So that is what the internal name it will keep on check. whether it's the same or a different class name. Next, we have the public name. Servlet as a public name that coded in the HTML. Client knows the name and use it to the URL to the servlet. That is what the name which you are giving for the particular HTML file. So that we have to add. By default, it will consider the index. Otherwise, you can change whatever the name you want. So, but the CA6 and CA7, what you executed there, the file name I taken as a CA6 servlet or CA7 servlet like that. So that name we have to give. So like this, we have to use these respective names in the servlet. Names in the servlet. So next, the deployment descriptor file with the both these elements look like this is the code what we use in the web.xml file. Servlet end with the servlet tag. Opening and closing of the tags are very, very important at any moment at any level of the XML files. So servlet name, internal one, servlet ending with the servlet name tag, servlet class, src dot servlet one, servlet class ending. So the name which I'm giving for my class name as well as my servlet name. So you can give whatever you want, but it should be available in the file name which you are using. So like that, I have the servlet mapping. This is a pseudocode I'm using. So servlet mapping, internal one, servlet name always should be same what I use in the servlet tag as well as servlet mapping tab. Next URL pattern, public one. So like this, we have to use this servlet as well as the servlet mapping tags in the XML part. So these are the these two things are very, very important when you guys are deploying the servlet application. So next in the this is the explanation for the above code what I shown here. So in the above XML, the values of the servlet name tag is the internal name of the servlet. The value of the servlet class tag is the class name of the servlet, and the value of the URL pattern tag is the public name of the servlet. The concept what I explained. So now the two XML elements map the URL to the server. One is servlet mapping, one is servlet tag. So this tag maps the internal name of the public name of the servlet. What is the internal name? What is the public name? Where I use? So everything it will just go with the mapping. So next. So next we have a servlet tag. So here tag internal name with the class name, the same explanation what I taken in the previous slide. So here the same. So this is how the container loads the servlet that client has requested. This is one of the user deployment descriptor. Deployment descriptor in the sense that is what web.xml file. This is very important. Suppose unfortunately if you deleted this file, you have to manually create the file, you have to manually add the file, then you have to build, then you have to finally deploy the entire application. So that's why be careful whenever you are developing the servlet kind of applications. Some of the other uses of this file is to customize the web application like security code or error pages. So by default, system will give any exceptions or error pages there. So you can set that error page, error message also what exactly it has to come. Suppose if this goes wrong, like there's the security code also, because whenever you guys are anyway, you are using your laptop, right? You are the admin rights. You have the admin rights. So for example, if you come to the lab, if you are using the application in the student mode, in the student account, so some of the port numbers are blocked. Some of the port numbers are blocked. So if that port number is not enabled, then you cannot run the application. So then you have to request for the admin account. Then from the admin side, you can run the application. So like this, we can set some of the code security also. But why we have to use this security code? So whenever we are taking care of the applications, when the security is a major part of our application, then we have to enable this security codes. Otherwise, no, anybody can use, anybody easily, they can manipulate the data which we have in the code at all. So that's why we have to take, these are some of the advantages what we have when we are using this respective servlet and servlet mapping tags. So next we have the web application development descriptor structure, deployment descriptor structure. So what are the things we have? So I hope so the same information. Yeah, much elaborated information. So web.xml file is the deployment descriptor file for the web application. So whatever the web application we are using, right? So for that we have to use, this is one of the necessary files. So this is a standard file for any web application, and container comes to know about all the detail of the web application through this file only. So this, by using this web.xml only, will come to know what is the Java file we created, the class name, Java file in the sense the class name, what class name we use, and what are the other files I have in my application, and what is the default page, that is what index.html, or lifecycle servlet.html or welcome.html. What is the default file you added as the opener, as a opener, right? So that also will come. So some of the information easily you will get to know by using the web.xml file. All configuration of the all components of the web applications are done in web.xml, and it's placed directly under the web-inf folder. This is what I talk, where exactly you will find the web.xml file. So if you visit web-inf folder, there you will get this respective file. So whatever the Java file, the basic programs what you executed, there also this folder is available. If you elaborate the tree, you will get it. So, but in servlet application, more number of files, and especially say web application, by default it will get elaborated. By default it will get elaborated. So the web.xml file comes under this respective folder. So next we have the servlet mapping. So all the servlet mapping needs to be done in the web.xml. So whatever the mapping of the respective HTML files, that is what. So after clicking this operation, after clicking the button, after selecting the radio button, what exactly takes place? Where exactly that has to be redirect? So everything has to be done, configured in the respective mapping file only, so that the servlet container will be aware of the servlet, also make it easy from the browser side. So when we have embedded everything in the web.xml, so it's easy to understand, okay, this is the first page it will open. After opening the first page, next it will direct to which particular page. So like that, the n number of files also we can keep on added. So next we must tell the servlet container what servlets to deploy, what URLs to map to the servlets to. Yes, this mapping code, this servlet mapping tag, what it will do is not only identify the respective Java files as well as the class files, not only it map the particular file, after mapping, next what it has to perform, also it will tell. So after deploying, what exact URL it has to redirect, so what are the information I have to display in the URL section, and what data I have to display, so everything it will take care. So below XML configurations, configure the servlet, my first servlet into a to init parameter. That is what parameter here. So this is the file name which I'm going to create now. So here you have a quite different compared to the previous one. So here just see where yeah, here I'm using just only one set of servlet and one set of servlet mapping. So now I'll show one more example. Here I have a more number of servlet sets. That is what servlet. In the servlet, I am using some more attributes, some more parameters. So XML version 1.0, encoding ISO, some particular format, web app, servlet name, my first servlet class, my first servlet. So everything I'm giving as a same name to avoid some confusion. Sometimes to get confusion will occur, right? So to avoid that confusion, the class name, servlet name, everything I'm giving as a same, no problem, it will work. So next, init parameter. Initialize the parameter. This is what parameter name, parameter value is a first value. We just remember in the index.html what we created, we have an input tag, right? Input tag in that type equals submit, type equals submit, value equals click here. This I'm taking the example, right? So here the parameter name which I'm taking as a type, that is what the name will display here, and the parameter value equals click here. So like this, I'm giving the respective parameters. When the initial parameter name it identifies, then you set the value as a first servlet. So like that, I'm ending with the initial parameter. Second time I'm displaying one more time. Second time I'm considering parameter name, purpose, parameter value, learning. So how it will differentiate the initial parameters based on the name which we are giving. So names which we are giving, it should be individual names. So it will identify the name, it will identify the purpose why I'm using. So these are the information. How it will distinguish the various parameters in the servlet. Then init parameter close, servlet mapping, servlet name, my first servlet. Here also I use the same. Next, URL pattern asterisk .html. So here I am not giving any preferable HTML file. So instead of the preferable HTML file, what I'm doing, generally I'm taking the general one, whichever the file exists in the form of .html. Either it's a index.html, welcome.html, or class.html, whatever the name you give for the HTML file. it will identify that respective file and it will display. By default file name, it will take default. That is what index.html, or when you have the multiple files, it will fetch with the respective file which having the servlet name as a my first servlet. Suppose I have a 5 servlets like first servlet, second servlet, third servlet, fourth servlet, and fifth servlet. So when I have a 5 servlet, in that which one has to match? You match all the index file, you match all the HTML files. In that it has to match where exactly the servlet name is matching. That is what my first servlet. This has to be matched when I'm taking as a general, when I'm taking as a random file. So this is another important point which we have to consider. In the previous example, I'm taking as a /lifecycle servlet. That is the exact file name. If you execute any number of times, the same file only it will get loaded. But here there is a chances of loading different files which end with .html. So how it will identify this file only have to load based on the servlet name which you are taking. Based on the servlet name which you are taking, you can have servlet blocks here. This is one time, second time, third time. Like this, you can match the entire code. You can add the entire any number of times the servlet classes, but ultimately map with the URL pattern which you are considering as well as the servlet name which you are defining. So this is how we have to use the respective information. That is what the deployment descriptor structure which we have in our servlet file. So next is servlet configuration. So next class you see, I think time is up. I'll stop here. I'll stop. Yeah, share your screen. Wait a second. Yeah, check now. Yeah, guys, who want to execute Monday, at least you can have an idea, see it. So you can leave the classes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.